So welcome to the Hopes at 30. We're back. So the people up here on this panel are part of the original Hopes Conference, original and the second Hopes Conference, which the first one took place in 1995, which seems like a really long time ago now. It makes me feel really old. But I really want to give a shout out to the Hopes, the whole Hopes team of organizers. I know what a huge effort it is to put on a conference like this. We all know what that's like. So thank you. And I also want to thank all of the panelists here. Super enthusiastic response. And as you can see, usually you have maybe 3 or 4 people on a panel, and we couldn't even accommodate everybody on the panel. So again, I want to thank all the panelists for showing up and agreeing to participate. So what we're gonna do is each panelist is gonna introduce themselves, talk about who they are, what they did on the original Hopes Conference, what they're doing now, and then we'll have a slide of a representative project. So everybody has 3 minutes to kind of talk about themselves, and then we want to leave the rest of our time slot for Q&A. So the conference, the original conference, the details for me are a little bit hazy, but the original inspiration was a conference that was put on at the law school that Karina and Brian and I all attended, and it was a student-run conference. It's still going on today, and we started talking amongst ourselves, and we were like, well, why don't we do something like this? So Hopes was really born out of a desire to gather together the allied arts, architecture, landscape architecture, art, planning, and then environmental design became involved as well, to explore ways that we shape the built environment and have a conversation about how we can do that sustainably. So each panelist, like I said, is going to introduce themselves. I'll start off. I'm Laura Hofferman. I was an Option 3 student here in the architecture program. Oh, thank you, Paul. And my role was a co-founder and co-chair of the 1995 conference. And then in 1996, I think I had the title of co-chair emeritus. So I'm not exactly sure what I did then. And then I am now an architect practicing in Seattle. And the project that I chose to represent is a park project, Maidenbower Bay Park in Bellevue. I've done quite a few park renovation and expansion projects over the last couple of years, and I think these really embody to me a lot of the things that I took away from Hopes, which was an interdisciplinary design team, a collaborative process from project conception all the way through to completion, and then the lasting legacy of a public place, in this instance being able to connect the city to the waterfront. All right, so I'm going to pass the mic. Brian.
All right. So my name is Brian Murtaugh. In '95, I was an Option 3 student, and I'm also one of the co-chairs of the original conference, along with Laura and Karina. And we also worked with Kevin Parkhurst and Liz down there, and Lori Biltman, who's not here. That created the steering committee for that original conference. But most of the big ideas all happened in very large meetings. We would have about 40 people gathering in 206, and that's where we decided to even have a conference. That's where we came up with the name Hope. That was quite a discussion. And that's where the design focus was really concretized as we moved through there. The first meeting that we had happened after Karina put up a poster just inviting people to have this discussion, again, inspired by the law conference. What is our voice as the design community in an environmental conversation? So the key thing as we've been talking about this conference is none of us knew what we were doing. None of us knew what we were doing at all. And we really were just building the plane as we went. But Laura, Karina, and I even had to go to a conference just to understand what went into one, you know. So, but it all worked out, and here we are. So my work, I work in Portland. I work for myself, and I have been for 20 years. I'm an architect. Originally, I had thought I'd do design build and after a very enlightening conversation with three people I call icons of design build, I shifted my thinking to be a collaborative team project. So I work closely with the owner and the contractor. The project up on the board is a good example of that. That was a 3-phase, 11-year project. We had artisans working on different aspects. The door that you see on this edge was from a knotty maple on site. This is a grid tie-back, solar, triple pane glazing, super insulated. One conversation we're going to have is how do we tie in our work now. These conversations about things that were alternative back in '07 when I started this are now more mainstream, and I'm able to talk to clients about common sense solutions as opposed to alternative solutions. And I think I'm lucky because my client base is referral and they tend to be like-minded, so it's easier for me to have that conversation. So, all right, that's me. Karina?
My name, can you hear me? Yeah. My name's Karina Cutler, and so I know I get this in on time. I made a board over there, and I have a question for everybody in the audience as you listen to all of us tell our stories. If you could think about if you knew you would succeed, what would your role be in creating a sustainable future? You should have little cards, and hopefully maybe you can stick some of your answers up on that magnetic board over there when we're finished. We will also put it out in the lobby afterwards. So my hope story starts on the side of a mountain where I fell in love with nature, and I also met the person who would become my husband later. Because of him, I wound up in this remote corner of Southwest Oregon at an off-grid barn with a wood-fired hot tub in the middle of nowhere. And there were a bunch of law students hanging around on boulders by the Rogue River talking about how they were saving the world with their public interest environmental law initiatives that they were forwarding. And it seemed really cool to me, but there was something really different about it, and that was there was not a shred of clothing among any of them. They were buck naked, tall, skinny, short, stout, hairy, bald, everything was all hanging out there. And it didn't matter because they were talking about something that was really important. So needless to say, I left with my young mind completely blown. I showed back up at Lawrence Hall, started paying more attention to my professors, like John Reynolds, Ginger Cartwright, Rob Pena should be right over here. And I also kept hanging out with those law students. And they even let me do a little logo for them. Obviously, we needed the same thing going on at Architecture and Allied Arts. So I kept trying to hit up people to join us. And in the beginning, I didn't get very good reception at all. And I was on the verge of giving up when I found these lovely people here. And these two in particular were really able to spark the idea forward and get this conference moving. I'm gonna skip the part about my career. I will just say I ended up working for a big developer who decided that environmental rules were cool. They put me in charge of over $1 billion worth of residential design and construction. It was not very popular, but the development ended up being quite successful. We had a lot of copycat developments that tore up raw land for wealthy people, and I became very disillusioned by that. So now I do other stuff. That's it.
We've got 3 minutes apiece. It's kind of a miracle that we're making this happen. Yeah, and I'm sure I speak for all of us. We'd be more than happy to talk with you guys afterwards about any of this stuff. My name is Derek Trost. I was an undergrad student back in '95 when this happened, and I worked with Kelly Lerner at the original Hopes Conference building a straw bale structure. 30 years later, I've been juggling music and architecture throughout my adult life, and that's still what I do. Perhaps in retrospect it's obvious, but over the years, music and architecture became more intertwined, and recording studios and live music venues became most of the work that I do, in addition to some small-scale commercial and residential projects. The project you see up here is a recording studio in Portland. There's an extensive use of salvaged, regional and locally salvaged materials, old cut-up chunks of an old basketball court for the floor, and all kinds of salvaged materials all over in the ceilings and walls. It also happened to be reclaiming a building that in a historically black neighborhood was the headquarters of a violent and racist biker gang. It was just a horror show in that neighborhood for 30 years. And that, I think, is a part of sustainability and durability that we often think about but don't talk about as part of these conversations, where the focus tends to be more on greener materials. And I also think that a big part of the durability of this project, therefore the sustainability of it, is really careful, thoughtful work with my client and with the contractors, all the carpenters, all the tradespeople in this job, to try to figure out really what the best solution is to pull this off, to make sure it's affordable financially, that logistically it's possible, that leaning into more ordinary materials, less exotic materials, is a way to get the work to actually happen and get it to happen for less, and to make a project that, for somebody in the music business where there's just never enough money and always lots of ideas, is that if the place is going to survive as a recording studio, it has to come in as inexpensive as possible. And I think that's a big part of sustainability, is if we're going to design places that then need to be built, then there's this quandary in front of us, like, how long can this place last as it is? And this is in a 100-year-old building already. And I think we pulled off a project that will last for a long time because it will be useful as a resource in the creative arts community.
Hello, I'm Elizabeth Carricker. I was in the planning program over at Hendricks Hall along with Jill and Kevin, and I was in charge of the speakers and panels, I guess, in 1995. My memory is also pretty fuzzy back then, but no, it was very inspirational. And throughout my planning career, just working for local governments as well as the private sector and my own consulting business for a while, just always keeping that sustainability theme thread running through. I grew up in San Francisco, just outside of the Presidio, when it was an active Army military base. And, you know, love to go in there and play and explore, because it's just an amazing piece of property, about 1,500 acres, right at the corner of the peninsula with the Golden Gate Bridge and Baker Beach, and just pretty amazing. So in the late 90s, when President Clinton signed it over to the National Park Service, it was a pretty exciting time for San Franciscans to have this national park, right accessible right in our backyard. So I moved down to Monterey. I did most of my planning career down there, but would come back and visit my mom in San Francisco in the marina and visit the Presidio and just start to watch it change and just become more accessible to the public. And I always thought what a dream job that would be to work there. So I now work there. And it's probably my last job in my career, which is pretty cool. So I've left all the city planning stuff behind and don't need to look back, and just can focus now on, I run this planning team that involves GIS and urban design and also zero waste and sustainability. And the first, couple of decades for the park, I work for the Presidio Trust. It's a legislative assigned federal agency to run the park. We don't get any federal annual appropriations. So we were given 20 years to become financially sustainable. So the first couple of decades was just all about renovating all the historic properties. It's a National Historic Landmark District, the whole park is. And so, a lot of the buildings, the period of significance runs from mid-1800s to mid-1900s pretty much. So a lot of historic preservation, historic building restoration, one element of sustainability, a lot of reuse and reuse. The historic forests are also reused throughout the park for lots of different kinds of furniture and things like that. And I'd love to talk about this more with any of you who are interested. So much to say, but anyway, thank you.
We could all each have a panel. Hi, my name is Hannah Weir, and I was a option 3 student the first year of Hopes, and I was essentially Laura's cheerleader. And then I was quickly drawn in and became the treasurer for 2 years and finally the co-chair at my last year. I am a practicer of design, construction, and education. I do architectural design in the Santa Monica Mountains predominantly, which is a highly regulated area and just burned down. So we're having a whole lot of fun stuff to deal with. We spend a lot of time educating our clients, so it's basically Hopes professional. We've never stopped doing Hopes. We do client education. We also do a lot of nonprofit education in the school systems. One of my specialties is native plants, and I have a great connection to the earth and the plants and how things grow, and I find that most of the humans are lacking in this area, and so I spend a lot of time having people to smell compost and do things that bring them back, because we seem to have completely lost our way in connection with the earth. And so clients have to be educated. It's a very important thing, because they come to you and they say, oh, I want to have this and that and the other thing, and you're like, well, the consequences of those things are quite great. Do you understand that? But we continue to push our clients and question their decisions about solar orientation, about window sizes, and all kinds of other things, about what plants they want to plant and how they're going to feed themselves when the other options are not available. People can grow a lot of food and also work, but we are unculturated to grow and harvest food. So I appreciate how much topics in that department this year we're experiencing, because I think finally your generation is kind of starting to understand that the food is our landscape. So I think my time is probably up, and I look forward to more.
It's weird that this is serendipitous and not planned, because this is a perfect segue to what I do. So, and I recognize a lot of faces, so I'm going to go quick. but I just, so I don't forget, I want to extend an invitation to everybody for our off-the-record super secret. You're all invited to the reception.
No password.
And no password. Yeah. So over at the farm after the last presentation and stuff today, probably around 5:30, 5:15. It would be great to see you all come over to the farm, and we have a assortment of soft and less soft beverages and some breads and spreads and things like that. So, but the urban farm is what I do. So I was undergrad at Hope's. It's my last year here, and I helped panels, find chairs, do the panel stuff, make the cards, because I'm a scrounger, I can do that kind of stuff. And then I also, because I was sort of the de facto urban farm person, helped with Kelly and Derek and the folks doing the straw bales, and there's some old cob stuff over there, some archaeology. But then when they asked, what do you do now? I decided to, the big construction project that's looming over us is a thing, and they put up a big plywood wall, and I said, do you guys mind if I paint on that? And they're like, well, what? And I said, I don't know, flowers and bees and stuff. And then I decided to just put my bibliography. So I graduated, was doing design build, and then started teaching, and that spoke to me well more than anything else. And it's all about what Hannah articulated just now about food. So I started sketching out these portraits, and they asked me, they wanted to know who I was painting, because they thought it would be George Floyd or something, like that's a bad thing. And I said, no, it's just my bibliography, and just so super quick, and you can come look at it when you come with a glass of wine or something. But Ron Finley is the gangster gardener from LA that's teaching people to take agency. Next to him is Vandana Shiva, who's been shaking it up for about 50 years in food sovereignty and seed saving in India and across the globe. In the middle is Leah Penniman, who got on the map by writing a book called Farming When Black. And she runs Soul Fire Food in New York and is the model of sustainability, land conservation, bringing back native foodways, rock star. Of course, next to her is Wendell Berry, who's been writing for 70 years, probably the poet laureate of agrarian writing in this country from that perspective. And then finally, Robin Wall Kimmerer, and I imagine a lot of you have been reading Braiding Sweetgrass and about reciprocity. So those are the themes that I bring to the urban farm while we teach them how to grow food.
Yay.
Hi, I'm Julia Lave Johnston. I have a master's in community and regional planning, and I spent 2 years working on the Hopes Conference. And I became a planner because, probably like everybody up here and all of you, I wanted to make the world a better place. And I understood that change doesn't just happen, you have to have a plan. So therefore, planning. And the thing that I took away from the Hopes Conference is really you can't do it by yourself. You need a community. You need a community of like-minded people. We're more powerful. In a community, we're greater than the sum of our parts. And that's really important. And so what I do now, I did a lot of policy work. I worked with Governor Schwarzenegger's office working on climate change for a long time and some of the landmark legislation that passed then, and that was very exciting and fulfilling. But what I do now is leadership development. And I run a couple of leadership development programs, one I actually get paid for, which is the California Academy for Regional Leaders. I work for the California Association of Councils of Government. We're the organization of all of the MPOs and COGs in California. And for those of you who don't know, they're the regional governments who allocate mostly transportation funding, but they also are getting more into housing and other things in California because they have money and they're pretty powerful. So that's been very interesting and very fulfilling to help other people find their passion and their ability to make positive change. And the only plug that I'm going to give is for the American Planning Association, which is another group of folks who together have more power than they do separately. I'm currently the chair of the Chapter President's Council, which is all the presidents across the country. And right now we're very involved in the questions around equity and the federal policy and how we can continue to still support our values in this climate.
Thanks, Julia. My name's Kevin Parkhurst, and I've got a master's in procrastination, as well. Everything else, drugs, rock and roll. My undergrad was from this university in architecture, Bachelor of Architecture. I told my mom when I was 9 I wanted to be a solar architect, and in response to telling her when I was 6 I wanted to be a poet and a singer, and she said, "Don't do that. Nobody's happy." And so I looked. I was a very shy child, which changed by the time I met all these people up here. And you can tell me I was the last one here. I think this guy over here probably I was the last one to turn stuff in the 95 thing, and I'm the last person here. I got to get some water. I didn't plan on that, but that's the way I am. And I'm sure I'm going to hear this little bell pretty soon. But I want to say that these people up here and many of you out there, these people over here, I love very much. Sakita, I love these people very much. These and my work in this group is absolutely the most important thing I've ever done in my life. I've never missed a conference, and so I'm 60 now. I've been 30 of these things. The first year, I saw Karina and Laura hanging up these posters. I had my undergrad in architecture, and I wrote myself, in '94, I wrote myself a job through the university to become the environmental policy development coordinator here at U of O, and so I wrote the environmental policy in '94, '95 that we actually still operate under here at U of O. The only thing that's changed, I broke the campus into 6 areas, and the only thing that's changed is hazardous materials, hazardous waste has turned to also include CO2, which in '94, you may not know that, we really, that wasn't really as important in our mind as it is today. So I was the administrator because I did not have the cult of personality within the architecture department as some of these other people, so I didn't want to run against them. And also, I like to do things behind the scenes, even though I'm kind of a, jump in front a lot of times too. Asshole too. Yeah, that jumps in front of. Oh, asshole. I didn't think. So anyway, Hope's conference. Hopes was the name that I came up with, that we debated so much about the word sustainability. I mean, sustainability at the time, it's a buzzword, and they're not going to use it and this and that. And so we voted every single thing we voted on, and I wanted to say that although I was studying alternative dispute resolution, and it's already 3 minutes. Alternative dispute resolution and group work, and consensus building does not mean that you always get consensus. And what happened actually in that first year, a couple of the folks up here with sustainability got to be part of it, and other things, they were like, I don't really want to be a part of those guys for a little bit. And then with Laura and Karina and Brian basically galvanized after a little bit of back and forth on who would be a part of it. And in the end, my man Renner, who came into it, who came later, who was there but was seemed a little too disorganized for him. He came to the ASUO. No, he's an organized person, and he came to the ASUO and he said to the ASUO, "We're not trying to build a lemonade stand here." Right, and I use that in my work today. That is a go-to phrase for Kevin. And I met my wife, Hannah Weir, here in this conference. Her and I worked on it for 3 years together. Peggy, have people before, during, and after their stay here at University of Oregon have come and worked with us down in, we work in the Malibu area. And we definitely, when we started Hopes, it was about how do we get people to know this information. I had a design and construction company at the time called WeDig, which was started by 2 of my friends in architecture school, and we just bought a house and started it. That now is Dig with Hannah and I, and that the thing on Hopes was to teach people to think this way so that all of us, as we got older, could have employees that would come and already know this stuff. And so, as was just mentioned, it has changed. I mean, it's totally changed, and it's beautiful, and I love that we're all here together, and thank you very much for being a part of this, because it's the most amazing thing. I also want to say, John Reynolds, I came here for him. Awesome. And afterwards, we have so many people that aren't here that really did a lot for it. Noah Friedman, he now has VibeMap. Get the app. VibeMap, he worked for SOM. He worked for all kinds of people. Fumiko Docker is awesome. We have so many people. Mark Tobin. Mark Tobin is in Costa Rica doing permaculture work. He was 2006. Howard Davis.
Tough act to follow, right? My name is Paul Falsetto, and 30 years ago I was an architecture and historic preservation grad student here at the U of O, and I did attend some of those early meetings about convening an eco-design arts conference, and I thought, that's too good of an idea not to happen. We need to do it however we can do it, and we did do it. For the first 3 years, I handled graphic design for the conference, and Kevin was kind enough to bring his collection of conference, we call it collateral. This was before the internet was anything like you think it is today. Nobody had a smartphone, so these things you kind of carried around and lived and died by. Currently, I have a sole practice in architecture in Portland with a focus on historic preservation. You can see one of my projects up on the screen. This is the Ladd Carriage House, constructed in 1883 by, or commissioned by, William S. Ladd, who was easily considered to be one of Portland's greatest citizens. And it's the last remaining building associated with this person, and it was slated for demolition in 2005. So a bunch of us got together and said, this is not going to happen, whatever it takes. And we worked pretty closely as citizen activists with the site developer to find a way to pick up a 750-ton building, move it 2.5 blocks off-site, have them construct 4 levels of parking on 3/4 of the block, and then move it back. That's phase one. And then the Great Recession hit, and it sat there waiting to be sold for 2 years. Phase two was converting it to the Raven and Rose restaurant. And my client was very interested in using the historic nature of the building to build a more historic menu. And that meant to be really cognizant of where ingredients were coming from, fresh, local ingredients. And I thought, I bet you this is a person that might be interested in achieving a LEED rating for this project. She was, we did. We came about 2 points shy of LEED Platinum, having to settle for LEED Gold. And these sort of projects, they were inspired by my time here at the U of O with people like John Reynolds and Howard Davis and Rob Pena, who's going to talk in a minute. They were informed by things like the Eco Design Arts Conference, and I aspire to do that in all my projects as I move forward. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Peg Butler. I live in Portland. I have a BLA and an MLA, so I have landscape architecture degrees from here. I'm involved with Hopes for 4 or 5 years. I can't remember. Kevin did panel coordination, logistics, food coordination, co-chair 1 year with Hannah. And I like these guys. It became like integral to my being. I learned whole systems thinking, or learn to understand what that was and how to utilize that in every part of my life. And sometimes I feel like it may be something that I shoot myself in the foot a little because I want to look at the whole system. And so my career trajectory is kind of like that bee design. You see dot, 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 where the bee goes here and there and there and there and there and gets a little bit of pollen from each place. So I got out of school, I worked in trail design a little bit, and then I went down to California and worked with Kevin and Hannah with Eric Lloyd Wright's studio for 4 years. Did other random things, and then I'll just shoot to 2006. I was looking for a job in Portland, and I went and volunteered for a landscape architecture conference, and Buster Simpson showed up. I don't know if y'all know Buster's work, but he's a public artist, and he's just a character. And I said, hey, Buster, I know you from Hopes from how many years ago? and you stayed at my house. And he goes, oh, cool, here, give me your card. And he runs off and presents whatever he was going to do. But then he called me up and said, will you help me with a project in Portland? And so I started working for him in 2006, doing public art kind of research. And then little by little, I started doing more work with him, and then ended up doing co-artist stuff with him, doing public artworks. Buster's work is the same way as my thinking, is integrated conceptually, functionally, environmentally, sometimes social practice-y. And so it's been a super great collaboration. I've worked with him since then, but mostly, a little bit on my own, and then fell into the realm of public art project management. And I work for Oregon Arts Commission now, doing percent for art project management. So I work in the world of just always multifaceted thinking and all these bits of information and people that need to be organized. And I got that, I'm sure of it, from all the years doing conferences here. This project is a project I did with Buster. It's nationally recognized as one of the best public art projects in America in 2012. So this is called Deconstruction, and collects rainwater off the building and goes through, well, first this was a parking space. Oh, dang.
Keep going.
I said I was gonna be short. Okay, it takes over a parking space. So it's a bike corral, kind of displacing the parking. First ever collaboration between the Bureau of Transportation, Portland Bureau of Transportation, Bureau of Environmental Services, and the Regional Arts Council. Bang the drum for the end of oil. These are oil barrels painted with a hue changing paint. Native plants on top, stormwater management in the street. That's it, thanks.
Hello, my name is Renner Johnston. Let's see, in the first year I worked on the straw bale construction demonstration. Second year I was one of the co-chairs. During this conference, I met my lovely wife, who you met down the line, and as you can see, we've been reproducing since. We live in Sacramento, so I'm now the president of a 30-person firm in Sacramento, and I've been there for a really long time. The reason I went there was because of the values that it had around its green design, its urban planning, its infill thinking, and all of the values that were there. So that's where I ended up pretty early on, and I've been there ever since. The project that I wanted to show you today. It's not the biggest, it's not the greenest, but it's my favorite. It's in Visalia, and one of the things, and I figured we'd be hearing a lot about energy savings and materials and stuff, but I did want to bring in the concept of the importance of land use and transportation. I'm married to a planner, so I have to say this now. Land use and transportation, and with all due respect, Mr. Reynolds, that it's also a big part of the energy equation, right? Of that transportation, right? And so this is a project where I'm literally behind it. It's across the street from a multimodal station, and it was delayed for many years. And why? Because there was going to be permanent supportive housing for people that were formerly homeless. And so they definitely did not want to have this project in their neighborhood, damn it. And so we worked with this really great client where there's a courtyard. It's a full city block, and there's a courtyard that's kind of in the middle, where people that are when you're formerly homeless, you often don't have a job, and the concern was that people would be hanging out on the streets, and it was all going to be this terrible thing for the neighborhood. And so we kind of made the building so you could see it as you wanted. Down at the end, you can see that little red brick building, and there was the Visalia Dance Studio. This is in the Central Valley, and the arts group was down there. And what we wanted to do was we actually created a little artist lofts in the first 7 units that are on the ground floor have their kind of sort of terraces that connect to the street. And then we put an art gallery in the center with the Visalia Arts Consortium. Has its own office, which is also really just the multi-purpose room for the affordable housing in this building. And then there's, it also was on a site that had an old historic palisade fort, sort of, they stick the logs in the ground. So we got the opportunity to make this wonderful sort of art piece in the front that you can see there that sort of speaks to that history. So for me, this was this attempt to try to bring the community and allowing, I hear the lead picker, thank you, to bring the community together of having art and history and most importantly, housing for people that need it in a place that's an infill, across the street from a multimodal station. Thanks.
Thank you. Hi, students, colleagues, friends, folks I've had adventures with over the years. I'm Rob Penny. I teach design and building science at the University of Washington. And 30 years ago, Laura and Karina and Brian said, hey, would you be our faculty advisor for this idea that we have? And I hopped on the caboose of the train, and it was a great ride. When these folks graduated, I decided I needed to graduate too. I came here to teach and to learn from John, from my colleagues here, and it was time for me to graduate like you guys and go off and do some application. So I went off to the Bay Area and practiced architecture with Sim van der Rijn for about 6 years. And then I decided, and for a number of circumstances, decided it was maybe really built for teaching, but I wanted to continue to seek inspiration, keep learning, experiment, and apply what I was learning. And so going back and forth between practice and teaching has been a great way to do application and have some adventure along the way. This was the picture up on the top was one of our experiments with rammed earth over 30 years ago. I'm somewhere in the middle there, but a number of our colleagues from that era. I went back to teaching at the University of Washington now about 18 years ago, and this idea for a building that would set a new sort of benchmark for the buildings of the future was an idea that Dennis Hayes had, and I got there at an opportune time, and he asked me if I was interested in helping with this. So we took it into the design studio. We went through a few rounds of design before the architects were selected, and ever since then, it's been a project of application, learning, experimentation, and we've continued to use it as a vehicle to learn and teach from. So y'all, thank you for all the inspiration you've provided me over the years. I've stayed in contact with many of my friends and colleagues now on this panel, and thank you, John, thank you, Howard, for all the inspiration we found in this room together. University of Oregon is a wonderful place to launch a career, so go out there and keep getting inspired and apply your knowledge in the world.
Hi, my name's Stefan, and I was not a co-chair. Well, all the heavy lifting kind of happened at that end of the table. I worked on organizing the workshops, and so we've heard about the straw bale. And what's nice about it is there are some remnants of it. So if you go down by the Mill Race Studios, I think it was Hopes 2, we did this rammed earth, or 3, rammed earth bike structure, and so you can see that kind of rotting away down there. Lessons learned there is don't put ferrous metals in bed into a concrete exposed to weather, because you'll see that it's rusting away. And then maybe it was Hopes 3 with the cob. There's it's a cob retaining wall, and there's little relics of that still inside of the urban farm, and I can't imagine how many driving laws we broke moving those straw bales across town. My friend Colin and I did that, and we probably had 4 times as many hay bales on that truck that we should have had, but we didn't ask those kind of questions. We're just like, well, of course, we just got to do it. So now I am really fortunate to work for the Port of Seattle. I did private practice for about 15 years, and was always just having to pull my clients along, sneak elements in, really kind of make an argument for materials just because it was the right material, and almost gloss over the fact there was sustainability qualities to it. What's so great is that I now work for an organization that is, it's part of our century agenda, and we're committed to sustainability, equity, and diversity. And we're still kind of shouting it loud and proud right now in the current administration. And what's so nice about it too is, you know, I'm able to implement things at scale and at huge scale. So, you know, making change one residential project or one kind of industrial building at a time was fulfilling, but it doesn't really move the needle. Now I get to work on, you know, a program leader for multi-million-dollar projects. This one was for the electrification of the cargo terminal at Terminal 5. There's lots of terminals, but two major cargo terminals in Seattle, T5, T18. And so it's the first two-berth facility in the U.S. where we can plug in two cargo ships at the same time. Seattle City Light is one of the only sort of net neutral utilities. I think, you know, occasionally they have to turn on their gas fires, but they then offset that with other stuff. So, you know, so not only were, you know, diesel's not being used, huge emissions, and then, so right now, currently in the project is we're electrifying Terminal 18. Again, that's going to be 2 or 3 more berths. And currently, all of the cruise ships that come to Seattle all plugged in while they're in port. So it's really excited to be at that scale, but it's still connected to, you know, accessibility, diversity, sustainability, just inclusiveness. That's not disconnected from what we're doing on the sustainability environmental side. And it's really kind of all started here. So thank you all.
All right, thank you, everybody. And so now we'd like to open it up to you all to questions. And if you have a question for a specific panelist, direct it to them. Otherwise, we're going to kind of freeform it. If there's someone on the panel who just, I want to take this one, we'll do that. And I think, Brian, we'll try to, I don't know if we want to set a time limit on questions. I don't want to feel like we're cutting off a valuable discussion. So we'll see how that goes. So, questions. All right, I'm going to run up. No, I can do it. No problem.
Okay, thank you all so much. My name's Jenny. I am graduating from the landscape architecture program this quarter, and I'm having a bit of a, I think, crisis of confidence about entering the workforce. It feels a lot of jobs available or routes that I've seen. The corporatism is really strong, and I just am so curious how you all navigated entering the workforce and kind of keeping your strong values from this work that you did. So I'd be very curious to hear more about that.
All right, who wants to take that one?
I'll at least take a piece of it from my end. For better or for worse, I was encouraged by Richard Britz, who started the urban farm here. He said, Trost, you want to learn how to be an architect? Go out and get some fucking work. I don't do employees. Here's a desk and a lamp and a phone. He's like, I'm around the corner if you need me. You know where to find me. I know where to find you if you're there. And it was just a spot for me to hang out and do work. And I experienced the same crisis of confidence. That would be the politest way to put it, as far as what the industry had to offer me and what I wanted to do and what I did not want to do. And I just have kept doing that the whole time and trying to continue to make it go and trying to figure out how to make a living doing it.
I got swallowed into corporate stuff. I think it was a great place to get a start. It was a great place to get some experience. They actually hired me because I was fairly intelligent and kind of a wacko liberal at the time. Probably still am. What happened is that they actually wanted to impose new environmental rules on their own people. And the rules did end up sticking. I did end up having an impact, but there were so many things that were against the way that I wanted to go that I eventually wound up working for myself. But it was very valuable to get that background and that work experience to start out with.
Thanks. So as a CEO of a corporation, I think it's important. First of all, it's not really a word that it shouldn't be used as a bad word. It's just a business mechanism based around liability, right? And there are lots of corporations that have a whole lot of really important sustainability goals that are not BS. And to just throw it all in, it's like, well, I think you're doing yourself a disservice. I would also encourage you as young people, when you go into the workforce, just because you don't get to design the greenest project on the planet on the first couple years doesn't mean that you aren't going to get to do that. And the world is a hell of a lot greener today than it was when we left school. And I know that's really hard to believe, right? Because the news is always telling you that it's not true, but it is true if you look at the data. I'm going to do a little quick book plug. If you haven't read Hannah Ritchie's Not the End of the World, there are a lot of young people that are scared to bejesus about climate change, including both of my young daughters who are in their 20s. And that book gives me a lot of hope because it's looking at the accomplishments of the things that we've achieved and not the things that we haven't achieved. So when we left this school 30 years ago, the use of coal was burning. It was actually still on an arc going upwards when we were here. And it is now only a third of that today. And there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. But focus on some of the good things and not just the bad things that the corporates are doing. Thanks.
All right, anybody else? Sure.
I'm the least qualified to tell you about jobs in corporates and things like that. I did design build because I wanted to be outside and build stuff. But my father did headhunting for a long time, executive recruiting stuff. He said all of the most lasting things are people live where they want to live instead of the job's good, but I don't really like living there. So pay attention to that too. If you can go to a place where you can live and contribute and might not even be the greatest job and get involved with that community, the likelihood of finding something for you that is fulfilling and pays you is possible. So think about that too. Factor that in.
Anybody? Next question? Anybody else? All right. Okay, yeah, project.
So, okay, who did the transect? Remind me. The architect. Was it Calthorpe? No, it was the guy from Florida. Anyhow, when I was, it seemed like there was a lot of talk about this around livable communities back in the day. And they actually had a transect that was not buildings, but was agriculture. And how do you integrate agriculture? And there was a big push for urban farms. You know, we're from Sacramento, Ren and I are, and they've really focused on farm to fork and local produce. And so there is this sense of wanting to have, it's found its market niche, but I actually think that it's lost momentum in some ways from where it was before, unfortunately. But I do think, and maybe Kevin, you can say something about this. I don't know if you guys incorporate food into any of your designs too. Yeah, so we want to say something about that? Hannah?
Oh, I'm going to talk about that?
Yeah.
Well, I don't have a planning degree, but I do plan things. A little bit more than my husband, who has a planning degree. I would say, food grows everywhere, and the biggest problem that I see is the humans that don't know how to harvest the food. I think the food integration into our environment is more of a cultural thing than it is a physical thing. We don't necessarily want it. And so that's what I find with the people. They're like, oh, I want the pretty orange tree over there. And they never pick the oranges. So, to me, it's really more about reculturating food. We have this idea, give me my bell peppers. They don't grow right now, so you're not having them. Getting your diet so it'll eat the food that's going to grow here is really important. Most food travels 1,500 miles to get to your plate. So stop ordering the stuff from afar.
Well, and I also think I was working on a project where we were trying to do gardens in people's front yards, because down in the San Joaquin Valley, there are a lot of folks who are immigrants or who have an agricultural background, and so this idea that they could have a farmer's market, then they could sell their produce from their yard. Somehow, but it's hard because of the regulations. For the same reason, people think of them as being a nuisance. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I think that people are open to it. It's just hasn't really taken off yet. That's my sense.
What do you study? Oh, so you're not in school now? Just checking. I was going to do a shameless plug for my civic agriculture class, offered every winter. The seats are full, But what we talk about, food is not calories. Food is social cohesion and resilience. In our community right now, the big earthquake's coming, you guys, right? And we have about 4 days worth of food in our community if the airport and I-5 are closed, right? That's scary stuff that no one's talking about. So, and it seems like the big changes that are happening have to do more in nonprofit, community-based initiatives that shine light on the importance and the kind of predicament we're in. And once people, and I think young people are really grasping this, which is really, really good. But once those necessities become line items in projects, usually public projects, then things like urban agriculture laws change to allow the stuff that Hannah is doing and that we teach. So it's about teaching people the value of food beyond just how many people are hungry or what does it cost, right? My eggs are the cheapest right now. We've been selling eggs for $7 and everyone's like, they're too expensive. And ours aren't. Anyway, and come to the thing, I'll talk to you more about it,
Other questions?
erode the box?
Well, I like how you started your question, which was listening. And I think that, yes, there are, architects that maybe have self-funded projects, but most of us have clients. And part of having a client is, some better than others, but we should be listening. What do they want? How do they want to live? Trying to redirect the conversation to not solutions, but what is the problem? What is the problem to solve? And so I think that is how I think about, it's not a fancy material, it's not a solar exposure. It's, community starts with listening. You and I are now having a conversation because you were listening. And I think that's the skill set that, when I think about how our education in, I was a fine art major and then architecture school, we did critiques. And critique wasn't criticize, it was feedback. It was listening. I show you something, you say something back. I respond with that. It was a conversation. Sometimes it was a, conversation speaking. Sometimes it's, the drawings were the conversation. And so I think that's the tenet that, that really, that's how you build community, is listening to one another, and hopefully then the work that you're creating, the spaces, are fostering a conversation to advance it. So.
Well, I'm thinking about this in terms of art activism, social practice art, or just guerrilla gardening, where what you need to do is make life visible and bring it to places and make it more normal, normalizing gathering or planting in weird places. Or I know Hannah and Kevin are really good at making seed balls, and you throw them out somewhere and native plants grow. And so often it has to bloom up from the base, from the people, just to cause a commotion. And I kind of think that the Hopes Conference has done that, and that's one of the things. Stefan's example, for example, getting the straw bale, getting it, doing the thing, and not asking permission. I'm kind of a rule follower, which is weird. And I remember I was working on a project, actually the one that was on the board, and I was talking to the engineers for the Department of Transportation, and they're like, just go, ask for forgiveness. Don't ask for permission. It's just too hard, So anyway, I don't know. Don't ask for permission. Do it.
So I'm going to build upon and maybe put a little finer point on what Stefan and Peg said. So as I hear it, your question had kind of two parts, which is how do you or how did you create community in the architecture, School of Architecture and Allied Arts is what we called it back in the day. And then how do you do it as professionals out in the world? So I'm going to talk about 30 years ago when we were architecture students. And this school in particular was started by an architect named Ellis Lawrence. He was given the charge of creating an architecture program, and he knew that it couldn't just be architecture. It had to be architecture and the allied arts. So there was a unification early on between all the design disciplines, and now it's the College of Design, which I think is even a tighter title and a better title to title this program, this school. We spent a lot of time in studio, and I don't know what other programs have that's equivalent to the design studio, which is 16 students there day and night, 7 days a week. I was never alone in studio, and I was there at 3 and 4 and 5 in the morning. So we had this collective effort to learn and learn from each other too. University of Oregon does something that's very unique, and again, Ellis Lawrence started this out, which is the studios are non-graded, which means that if I have an idea and I present it, and then Kevin comes behind me and has the same idea, he just happened to, and presents it, the teacher's going to say, well, the first one I saw gets the A, the second one gets the B. Well, all of a sudden now we're not going to share information because it's a competitive thing. So this school was set up to be collaborative, and the environment of working in studio is a kind of a unifying and sharing element. And then finally, back in the day when there was no internet to speak of, I mean, 94, I think we got email addresses and we didn't know what the hell to do with them. What do I do with this thing? If you wanted to learn something, there was a couple ways to do it. One is you got a book. The other one is you go find that somebody that's talking about it. And the third and best way, we thought, is to bring them all here. And so it was about people coming and gathering together because that's what you had to do. There was no YouTube, there was no videos to do that. And so I think that's one of the reasons we started the conference. So those are ways we created community in our architecture school and design school. And you can tell we have a lot of disciplines up here. And so if there's a way to continue that, I think that's probably true as far as design studio goes. Students are in there grinding away doing their work. If somebody wants to answer the question about how we do it outside that, or maybe I'll just, okay, we'll pass it down here.
So what was your name? Dorothy. You have touched upon my biggest fear for the young people in this audience today, and that is that I know that if I were young at this time with everything that's going on, I would shrink back into my world of knowledge, that internet thing, and I would seek the company of my colleagues a lot less than I did during the Hopes time. And what I think, I know you have an architectural focus about buildings and spaces, but I would ask, well, two things. One, I think that there is an extreme desire for people to come and gather. People are lonely right now. They are, I think that we saw it after the pandemic, kind of when the gates were lifted again. People found any excuse they could to come flock together. And I guess I would bat it back at you and say, hey, do we need to build the spaces first? Or do we need to build the communities first and then have the communities then create those spaces?
I would like to say something really quickly from the planning perspective. What was so great about Hopes was this recognition that it was a system, that it wasn't just the building, it wasn't just the planning. Now, we talk a lot about housing and transportation. It is collective. You cannot just build a building and save a community. You cannot just design a beautiful community without people who are willing to commit to that vision. If you have the wrong road system and everyone's in their cars, you killed a community before you've even started building it. So it is that collective. We have to build those relationships outside of our silos and work together to really have that strong vision.
I wanted to just follow up on a couple of those things. I wanted to say, you may not know, if you've ever looked at the U of O mission statement, which is, I started the environmental policy by just quoting the mission statement, which the first phrase in that is, the University of Oregon will be a catalyst for change, not just react. And so that definitely empowered me at this particular time in my life to put it out there for the University of Oregon to do. And we have in this conference definitely changed. There was a guy named Robert Bowman who did Maitreya over on like 10th and something near Almaden, and he was working on cob construction, and he has literally changed the code to allow earthen floors in the United States. Here, if you go to the bamboo structure out here, which was Noah Friedman's year, 1999, that bamboo structure out there, we hosted the American Bamboo Society that year, and that is inspired by my wife over here. We got into it, Noah and I, and that is the first bamboo structure in North America that actually went through the permit process, which is how codes change. Is some municipality will do a conditional, provisional approvals, and then you do that and you test it and you make it happen. And a lot of times, we are looking for the quick change. One thing I was following up on Paul, that we would invite a lot of people here. The original 10 conferences were there was nearly always a charrette on Thursday where we invited people from Georgia and Florida, UW all the time, to come here and actually do a charrette, work together for a couple days, and then, well, not sleep on Thursday night, basically, so you're really wiped on Friday for the event on Saturday, but that it would be something that would really activate the people and bring us together, because I do believe the relationship, one-on-one personal relationships, is really, really important. And I just wanted to say one more thing as far as the time that we have here and how long it has been. I mean, there was one bamboo floor, Smith and Fong, when we started this conference. U.S. Green Building Council started the year that we got together. The year in 1994, that was the first. There was no lead for 3 more years until then. And so, and things have changed. Things have changed tremendously. Sherwin-Williams at the time had the only eco paint line, and now everybody has an eco paint line. And then Sukita over here, she's got earth and floors. She has made these, and I think Robert Bowman, you worked with him a lot early on or something like that. And she has got clay lin floors and doing wonderful things. And so I want to just say my last thing. For now. There's a poet named Rainer Maria Rilke, my wife's most famous, favorite quote. And I want to say, there is time only to work slowly. There is no time not to love.
Kevin drops the mic.
So we can work slowly and we can make it.
I think, to paraphrase what Kevin is saying, is that we can all be leaders in this field. We are all leaders.
Do we have time for a quick other little tidbit?
Absolutely.
I just thought it would be inspiring for this question to quote Mr. Shaw Michael from yesterday. I know you noted what a profound statement it was. He put up a slide, and I don't know if any of you guys had been to the presentation, very, very insightful presentation about community and the structures in which we can gather and heal. And so he brought up this thing at the end about the architect as steward. And that's very much how I feel about my career, and I'll read off his bullet points. To be a steward is to listen first to the land, the people, and the silences in between, and to design from that deep listening. It's not an ego thing. To be a steward is to sketch not just what is asked for, but what is quietly yearned for and not yet spoken aloud. To be a steward is to translate collective memory into form, and to collective longing into possibility. To be a steward is to hold space for joy, sorrow, resistance, and renewal, sometimes all in the same room. To be a steward is to bend lines, reimagine ideas, and blur the boundaries, so that everyone has a place to belong. To be a steward is to build not just structures, but the conditions for dignity, beauty, and grace to take root. And I feel like this is a very significant shift of the architectural paradigm, and I encourage everybody to embrace that. I feel like our architecture, you know, the specialization process has become so complex that everybody's alienated from the physical world. How do you build something? It's like the most basic things. Didn't you guys do that when you were kids? I mean, having an architectural license doesn't actually change your ability to build and envision and create and make form and space. So I say, let's transform how architects interact with the world.
Thank you, everybody. Before we all break, we would like to here, let me get this out. Recognize the commitment of two individuals on this panel who I think embody the doing it, the commitment, the sustaining it, despite some just unimaginable hurdles. Kevin and Hannah. Yeah, this has been amazing. I mean, I just feel energized and excited and mostly hopeful, right? You know, people going out into the world. We've been out in the world. We're still out in the world. We've been able to reconnect with each other. It's fantastic. And so let's keep the conversation going, no matter where we're going. And we can continue it at the Urban Farm, as Harper said, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. I know there's still some more activities today. So again, thank you everybody for listening and asking questions and bringing all that you bring to this hopeful place.